Dad, wake up! We need to take Mom to the hospital! Jessica, our daughter, was crying out in a panic because my water broke 2 weeks early at 1 a.m. Despite my attempts to wake him, my husband Charles finally opened his eyes. My water broke. I know you have an early meeting for your business trip, but can you take me to the hospital? Charles, who had been looking forward to the birth of our second child. Although he didn't do much around the house, he worked hard for the family, especially since we were going to be 4. I thought he would immediately say yes and take me to the hospital, despite his sleepiness. However, what he said next was unbelievable. What? I have a trip first thing in the morning. That's impossible. Saying that, he immediately covered his head with a blanket, trying to go back to sleep. Something in me snapped. Fine, I'll drive myself, but you have to take care of Jessica. That's all I ask. I yelled at Charles. Okay. His response made me even angrier, but I ignored Charles and left the house. 3 days later, while visiting me in the hospital, my daughter Jessica received a call from Charles. Dad, we're at the hospital now. Jessica answered the phone happily. I'll be back tomorrow. Is your brother cute? Yeah, we're about to bury him now. Bury? What do you mean? Yeah, we're going to bury him. What are you talking about? Where's Jennifer? Let me talk to her. Everyone's busy. I'm busy too, so I'm hanging up. Bye. Saying that, Jessica hung up on her dad, who was still complaining over the phone. My name is Jennifer. I am 39 years old. Jessica, I'm at the hospital today. You'll be alone for a while after school, but don't do anything dangerous, okay? It's okay, I'm already in 3rd grade. I'll eat some snacks, do my homework, and watch TV. Oh, should I vacuum? That would be a huge help. Thank you. Kids grow up so fast, and this year, our daughter Jessica turned 9. She's grown into such a responsible and incredibly kind child. You managed to get the day off, huh? I got someone to cover for me, but I have to go in on Sunday, the day after tomorrow. So please take care of Jessica. Okay, I'll work hard too, for the medical expenses and our second child. Well, I'm off. My husband Charles left the house, full of determination. I felt a bit of pressure. We got married at 28, both of them the same age. Jessica was born when we were 30. Living away from both our parents, I had to return to my parents' house to give birth, but after coming back, I had to take care of the child, almost alone. Charles worked in housing and always came home late. Moreover, I, who was working full-time back then, had to return to work when the child turned 1. Struggling to balance first-time parenting and work, time just flew by. My memories of that time are only in fragments. We should have 2 kids. I had completely forgotten about those bright and happy future discussions with Charles for a while. However, as time passes, children will grow, and I too will grow as a parent. Seeing siblings holding hands and coming home happily from the childcare center made me naturally start to smile. My friend got a sister. I want one too. Or maybe a brother would be better. Jessica began to envy her friends who had siblings. As Jessica was about to enter elementary school and I began to feel more emotionally prepared, I started considering having a second child. One day, I casually mentioned it to Charles. Hey, should we start thinking about a second child? Sounds good. I'd like a boy this time, but daughters are adorable too. Charles, who had always said he wanted 2 children since we got married, of course agreed happily. At this time, I was 36. I was at an age considered advanced for pregnancy, but since we conceived our first child easily, without much effort, I thought getting pregnant with the second child would be just as easy. However, reality was not so kind. A year passed, and I was not pregnant. Maybe you're just putting too much pressure on yourself. It'll be okay. Plenty of people have kids at 40. How about we go on a trip for a change of scenery? Every time it was confirmed I wasn't pregnant, I got depressed, and Charles tried to be considerate in his way. But thinking about my age, I couldn't help feeling anxious. I think we should go to the doctor. One day, I brought it up with Charles. He agreed immediately. Going to the hospital will give us peace of mind. Don't worry, infertility treatment isn't rare these days. His somewhat detached manner irritated me a bit, but I knew this was his way of being kind. He sometimes misses the mark on what people really need, but at his core, he's truly kind. I realized how narrow-minded I had become in my anxiety over not getting pregnant. The fertility treatment was more challenging than expected. While I needed to take care of my body, my job demanded a leader's performance, and it was honestly difficult to take time off for treatment several times a month. Though parenting had been tough, quitting my job had never been an option for me, but this was the first time I truly struggled with the decision. If things continued this way, everything would end up half done. I knew I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't commit to the treatment now. I made up my mind and talked to Charles. Charles, you do want another child, right? Of course. It would make things livelier, and Jessica wants a sibling too. Hearing Charles's words, I made up my mind. I'm thinking of quitting my job to focus on the treatment. Huh? You've never said you wanted to quit your job before. He was very surprised. I've realized these past few months that it's difficult to keep working and go to the hospital. Considering my age, I think now is the only time to really try if we want another child. Charles silently looked at me. After a while, he quietly said, Okay, do what you need to so you won't have regrets. Don't worry, I'll work even harder as the head of the family. I wanted to say we should work on this together, but I held back. Even though his perspective was slightly off, he was thinking of our family in his own way, so I forced a smile at Charles. Thank you. And, the person at the deli asked if I could work there part-time, a few times a week. They said they'd be flexible around my treatment. Treatments are expensive, so I'll work within what I can manage. Alright, just don't overdo it. Good night. Saying that, Charles yawned and went into the bedroom. Charles, who accepts everything I decide. What a broad-minded person he is. He's broad-minded, isn't he? It's not that he's uninterested. My heart feels restless. No, this cycle of negativity. I must blow it away. Surely if I get pregnant, my heart will feel lighter. I'll give my all to the treatment. And so, I decided to dedicate myself to infertility treatment. Quitting my job indeed reduced my stress. Plus, the deli where I worked part-time had such kind employees that I never felt stressed there. While I felt more at ease, the treatment results were hard to come by. Maybe it's because of my age. I had turned 39. Honestly, I thought about giving up on having a second child multiple times. But having quit my job for the treatment, I couldn't just stop the infertility treatments easily. It wasn't like anyone had said anything, but I knew giving up now would disappoint Charles and Jessica. Seeing Charles work even harder after I quit my full-time job made me want to try a little longer. So I kept up with the treatment. And now I'm standing in front of the hospital. I just finished my appointment. In my hand is an ultrasound picture. Sorry to call you at work, but guess what? I'm pregnant. Finally, a baby was growing inside me. I was so overjoyed that I called Charles even though he was at work. Jennifer, that's great. Really great. Our family is growing and I'll work even harder. Saying that, Charles hung up the phone. When I got home and told Jessica about the pregnancy, she clapped her hands in joy. I'll help out a lot, so just tell me anything you need. Jessica offered to take care of me now that I was pregnant. She's definitely going to be a kind big sister. Even though the baby's arrival was still a ways off, I was already imagining the lively and happy life of our family of 4. However, that warm feeling lasted only a short while before I was hit with terrible morning sickness. I had severe morning sickness. Perhaps it was because of my age, but there were times when I couldn't eat at all and had to be given an intravenous drop. Standing became too difficult, so I reluctantly quit my part-time job as well. Jennifer, you rest. Jessica and I will take care of the meals. Charles tried to come home early and take over the household chores in place of me suffering from morning sickness. But after a month, he started coming home late again, as before. I need to earn a lot for our incoming child. I'll be off to work. Furthermore, he would say this and leave the house even on weekends. All I could do was watch his retreating back with a sense of resentment. I really wished Charles would do more around the house, but having quit my part-time job, I felt I couldn't voice my wishes to Charles, who was working for our family. I wish I could go back to my parents' house for the birth. I thought about it, but my parents were nearly 70. I couldn't rely on them like I did 10 years ago with Jessica's birth. Reluctantly, I did a little housework whenever I felt slightly better. I'm home. How are you feeling, Mom? You can rest. I'll take care of it. Worried about me, Jessica came straight home every day. Thank you, Jessica. You're so kind. It makes me very happy, but it's okay to go out and play with your friends. Before my pregnancy, Jessica often played with friends at a nearby park after coming home from school. Feeling guilty that I couldn't do much around the house, Jessica smiled and said, I'm really looking forward to the baby. I want to do my best because I'll be a big sister. So Mom, please take it easy. What a kind child she has grown into. Tears filled my eyes at my daughter's kindness. Thank you. Make sure you hug the baby a lot when they're born. Yeah. Even if Charles wasn't around, having Jessica with me made me feel secure. Thanks to Jessica, my anxieties and dissatisfaction with Charles slowly eased, and with the baby growing well in my belly, I was able to lead a calm life. Then, one day, with just 2 weeks left until the due date, I woke up in a panic, feeling as if something had burst. Could it be my water broke? The clock pointed to 1 a.m. Charles had mentioned he had an early business trip that day, so I hesitated for a moment before waking him. No, this isn't the time for hesitation. Hey Charles, wake up! My water broke! I frantically shook his body, but he snored on, showing no sign of waking. Hey Charles! My water broke! We need to go to the hospital! Hello? I raised my voice in a slight panic, but still, he didn't wake up. Then, the bedroom door opened. Mom? Are you okay? There stood Jessica, groggily staring at us. Sorry for waking you, Jessica. The baby is coming, so we need to go to the hospital. Jessica in the next room can wake up, so why can't you? She gets irritated and throws a pillow at his back. Ouch! What's happening? Though he made a noise, he was still half asleep and didn't open his eyes. Glaring at him, I started preparing to go to the hospital in a hurry. Seeing me walk slowly while holding my belly, Jessica must have become worried. She started crying loudly. It's okay, Jessica. We're going to the hospital. Then Jessica, crying out, began to hit Charles's back hard. Dad, wake up! You need to take Mom to the hospital! Thanks to Jessica's cries, Charles finally opened his eyes. My water broke. I know you have an early meeting for your business trip, but can you take me to the hospital? Charles, who had been looking forward to our second child, although he didn't do much around the house, he worked hard for the family, thinking of us becoming a family of 4. I thought sleepiness wouldn't be an issue, and expected an immediate response to take me to the hospital. However, his next words were unbelievable. Huh? I have a trip first thing in the morning. That's impossible. Saying that, he immediately covered his head with a blanket, trying to go back to sleep. In such a critical situation, how could he say something like that? Something inside me snapped. Fine, I'll drive myself, but please, you have to take care of Jessica. I yelled at Charles. Got it. His yawning response made me even angrier, but I ignored Charles and left the house. Mom, are you okay? Jessica, who had carried some luggage to the car, looked worried. I'm fine. Dad has to go on a business trip, but I'll ask Grandma to come over, so she'll be here until Dad gets back. Don't worry. Okay. Jennifer, what happened? At that moment, our neighbors, Margaret and Kevin, came out of their house. I'm sorry for the disturbance so late at night. My water broke and I'm heading to the hospital now. Seeing me trying to get into the driver's seat with my big belly, the couple was shocked. Jennifer's driving herself? Charles has an early morning business trip. I couldn't bring myself to say he was just sleeping, so I mumbled my words. Kevin? The couple exchanged looks and nodded. I'll drive you. But at this hour, no, it's more worrying to let you go alone. Margaret quickly went back into their house and came out with the car keys, handing them to Kevin. Kevin efficiently transferred the luggage from my car into his. If Charles is on a business trip, we can look after Jessica for a while. They were even concerned about Jessica, and I felt like crying. My mother will come, but please, I'm counting on you if anything happens. Margaret nodded with a kind gaze and crouched in front of Jessica. Jessica, if anything happens, just ring our doorbell, okay? It doesn't matter if it's early morning or late at night. Thank you. Thanks to the couple, I was able to regain my composure. Seen off by Margaret and Jessica, I got into the car driven by Kevin and headed to the hospital. And so, I was admitted to the hospital. 12 hours later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. 3 days later, Jessica came to visit me in the hospital, accompanied by my mom. The baby is so tiny. Nice. Jessica gently poked her sleeping brother's cheek with a finger, looking at him with wonder. Every time the baby moved, she squinted her eyes and kept saying, "Cute," repeatedly. She also took loads of pictures of her brother with the camera she brought from home. Then, my mobile phone rang. It's from Dad. I had only reported the birth to Charles, but I hadn't been in contact with him otherwise. Unable to forgive his behavior on the day my water broke, I hadn't sent him any pictures of the baby. Aware of my anger or not, he seemed to be keeping in touch with Jessica, at least daily. I asked Jessica to put the phone on speaker mode. Dad, we're at the hospital now. Jessica answered the phone happily, and Charles's voice filled the hospital room. I'm coming back tomorrow. Is the little brother cute? Yeah, we're about to bury him now. Bury? What do you mean? Yeah, we're going to bury him. What are you talking about? Let me talk to Jennifer. I quietly shook my head. Everyone's busy. I'm busy too, so I'm hanging up. Bye. Saying that, Jessica ignored whatever Charles was still saying over the phone and hung up. Afterward, I immediately turned off my mobile phone. I was sure Charles would try to contact me. We're in the hospital, so I'll turn off my mobile phone too. Okay. Then, I also turned off Jessica's mobile phone. Jessica, unaware of how much her words had unsettled her father, aimed her camera at her brother again, trying to capture the best shot. Remembering Charles's flustered voice, I felt a slight sense of satisfaction. No matter his early morning business trip, I felt he needed to reflect on his actions, and I was determined to ensure that happened. I had already discussed this with my mom, Patricia. If Charles tries to contact you, just ignore it. There's no need to answer his calls. Understood. Charles must be reflecting on his behavior during this business trip. Men don't give birth, so pregnancy and childbirth always seem like someone else's issue to them, just like your dad. My dad had apparently stopped at a bookstore on the way to the hospital while my mother was in labor. Enduring her contractions, she wondered what was happening when my dad, Sam, returned with his favorite golf magazine in hand. Then, my dad, "It's going to take a while before the baby is born, and I'm bored." He seemed to say it calmly. He had left my mom, who was in labor, waiting while he went to buy a book for himself. My mom told me this story with a laugh, saying she had truly resented my dad at that moment. Dad was terrible. Such grievances turn into laughable stories over time. That's marriage for ya. Hearing my mom's words, I felt a bit of my anger towards Charles subside. Grandma, let's print the photos at the convenience store. Having captured the perfect shots of her brother, Jessica started preparing to leave. All right, Jennifer, I'll come back tomorrow. Make sure you rest when you can. See you tomorrow, Mom. I'll print out the photos for you too. Thank you. See you. Jessica waved to her brother and left the hospital room cheerfully. The next day, after school, Jessica came with my mother. We all looked at the photos she had printed yesterday. His face looked so different from yesterday to today. Jessica stared at her brother, whom I was holding. Babies grow incredibly fast. It's so sad Dad can't come to see him every day. He's missing out. At that moment, Charles burst into the hospital room, out of breath. Jessica's here! And Patricia too! Charles is surprised to see Jessica and my mom. After greeting Mom, Charles asked about the baby with a concerned look on his face. How's the child? I exchanged glances with my mom. Here, your son. He was born safely and is growing healthy. I gently showed our son to Charles. Oh, right. Looking at his son, who was sucking on his finger and sleeping comfortably, Charles seemed relieved, yet there appeared to be something still troubling him. He then looked at Jessica. "Jessica, what did you mean yesterday about burying?" Jessica excitedly began to explain. "At school, we're going to bury a time capsule. We'll dig it up when I turn 20, 10 years from now. The teacher said to bring something important, so I decided to bury a photo of my brother." My mom and I laughed as we looked at Charles, who cleared his throat. "I see. So that's what it was about. Oh, are these the photos Jessica took?" Relieved upon understanding the context of Jessica's burying, Charles looked at the photos. "He looks just like Jessica when she was little." Finally, his face softened as he looked at our sleeping son. "Look, it's Dad." I gently handed our son to Charles, who awkwardly held his child. My mom, Jessica, and I all smiled at the scene. Despite everything, I was just glad our child was born safely. I was finally able to feel truly grateful for that. The next day, my son and I were discharged from the hospital, and we began our new life as a family of 4. The baby's name, decided by Jessica, was Paul. "Paul, I'll change your diaper." Jessica was always by Paul's side, checking on him whenever he cried to see if his diaper needed changing or if he was hungry, taking care of him attentively. With my second experience of motherhood, I found myself more relaxed and able to enjoy life with a baby along with Jessica. Meanwhile, Charles was pacing around the house with a stern face from mourning. "Are you looking for something?" "My presentation materials. I need them for a meeting tomorrow. I took them out of my bag and put them here before my trip, but..." It seems Charles had left important presentation materials on the dining table before his business trip, but they were nowhere to be found upon his return home. Then Jessica innocently said, "I buried Dad's important thing too." "You buried it?" Charles' eyes widened in shock, and he gaped at me. "I buried something important from Ham too, in the time capsule. It's a surprise for 10 years later." Although I didn't know what she buried, there seemed to be no immediate harm on my end, so I let it slide. I gave a wry smile at Charles, but he was far from smiling, looking pale as a ghost. He locked himself in his room afterward, working through the night to redo the presentation materials. He looked terrible the next morning, but I sent him off without mentioning anything. Jessica wasn't to blame. After all, it was his fault for leaving important things on the dining table and going on a business trip. However, I thought it commendable that he didn't scold Jessica. That evening, Charles came home earlier than usual and sat down at the entrance. I messed up. Apparently, the hastily prepared materials had many errors, earning sighs from his boss during the meeting. Moreover, due to his poor presentation, he was removed from a project he was supposed to lead. After all the effort of working on holidays! He slumped over the table. I comforted him gently. "Thank you for working hard for us. What's done is done. The only thing to do is reflect and learn from this." Despite everything during my pregnancy and childbirth, I knew he had prioritized work, trying his best as the head of the family for us. "It'll be okay. You can handle it." I prepared a warm meal. Somewhere along the way, my resentment towards him had completely vanished, replaced by a desire to support him while he was at his lowest. Then, Jessica quietly came out from the bedroom. "Paul is asleep." Jessica had also put Paul to bed, proving herself to be a wonderful little mom. Being able to want to support Charles probably comes from having the peace of mind that Jessica takes care of Paul, allowing me some space to breathe. She really is a dependable sister. "Dad, you're home early today, so we can eat together. Let's eat together tomorrow, too, if you can come home early." Seeing Jessica smile so brightly made Charles seem a bit happier. "Yeah, I'll come home early." Jessica looked very pleased with his response. After that, Charles made it a point to come home before Jessica went to sleep, even if he couldn't make it for dinner. "Today? Paul?" Every day, Jessica would show Charles pictures of Paul she took on her mobile phone, telling him about Paul's day. It seemed to inspire Charles to want to be more involved with the children, and on weekends, he started to take the initiative in caring for them. Perhaps the decrease in work due to the presentation mishap played a role, but for us as a family, having more family time turned out to be a blessing. I'm not doing as much overtime, so my salary has decreased, he said apologetically, but I shared my thoughts with him. I truly believe that the time spent with family is fleeting, so I think it's better to cherish family time rather than sacrifice it for work. Don't worry, I'm managing our finances well. Seeing me smile, he grinned sheepishly. Thanks. I finally realized how precious the time spent with Jessica and Paul is. And when I'm down about work mistakes, being with the kids makes me want to try harder again. Kids are amazing. That's right. Jessica and Paul are such dear beings. There's nothing happier than feeling your own children's growth firsthand. Focusing solely on earning money can gradually weaken one's spirit. Having found something else of true value, Charles grew significantly, both as a person and as a father. Will you be able to come home early today? Sorry, I'll be late today, but I'll finish up my work so we can spend the whole day together tomorrow. Think about where you want to go, okay? From then on, he worked while valuing family time. This approach eventually had a positive effect on his customer service. Realizing the importance of family made him offer better advice to clients, understanding that a home is a space filled with a family's dreams. Although his performance had temporarily declined due to the presentation mishap, it was recovering thanks to this change. Additionally, our neighbors played a role in his recovery. 2 years ago, Charles was involved in remodeling their house. They deeply appreciated how he listened and offered advice beyond just the official meetings. Their word-of-mouth praise as a great salesman led to more work requests specifying Charles. Originally kind, Charles discovered that valuing his family enabled him to be even more dedicated to his work. 10 years later, at a reunion for her 20th birthday, Jessica dug up the time capsule with her elementary school classmates. Look! She opened the can of snacks she brought back in front of the whole family. This is Paul 3 days after he was born. He was so adorable back then. Looking at the photo Jessica picked up, memories of those times came flooding back. He's still plenty cute now, right? Paul smiles shyly and is already 10 years old. He is the same age as Jessica back then. Thanks to his older sister, he is still a spoiled younger brother, but he has grown up to be kind and obedient. Ah, my wedding ring. So it was here. I picked up the wedding ring, feeling relieved. I had taken it off during my pregnancy because it was too tight, and after giving birth, I looked everywhere for it, but couldn't find it. I kept quiet about it to avoid troubling Charles, never expecting it to be here. This was your important thing, wasn't it, Mom? You really understand, don't you? I chuckled, impressed at how observantly she watches her parents. And then, the last item to come out was Charles's presentation materials. He took them, flipping through nostalgically. Losing this was a moment of despair for me, but because Jessica included it in the time capsule, I was able to realize what's truly important. Thank you, Jessica. So much had happened indeed. Probably Jessica, still only 10 at the time, didn't fully grasp what Charles meant, but the time capsule had become a catalyst for strengthening our family's irreplaceable bond. Thank you, Jessica. Though Jessica has grown into a complete adult, her shy face still retains some innocence, and I hugged her tightly. Hey, Dad, are you building houses? Paul asked while looking at his father's presentation materials. Dad talks a lot with clients about what kind of house they want to live in and helps them make it happen. See, like this. I draw the floor plans. Paul listened, eyes sparkling with interest. Dad's amazing. I want to be like Dad. Charles, blushing at being admired by his son, looked incredibly happy. After that, Paul became thoroughly interested in Charles's work, practicing drawing floor plans while looking through the presentation materials. It seems he has his own ideal layout in mind. Watching the two of them side by side at the desk on weekends, I felt sheer happiness.